Bringing intimacy back. What does intimacy mean to you? In a world that feels more connected than ever, many people feel more disconnected than ever. It's time to reconnect. It's time to communicate. It's time to bring intimacy back. Bringing Intimacy Back, hosted by Dr. April Brown, the Doctor of Intimacy, co-hosted by Brittany Garcia and Thomas Luster. Intimacy is more than sex. It's connection. It's communication. It's relationship. Bringing intimacy back, where intimacy is real, creating deeper connections, one conversation at a time.
Welcome to the Bringing Intimacy Back show, where intimacy is real. Good day, Brittany and Tommy. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, good afternoon. Doing well. How about yourself?
Okay, can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure. Brittany, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yes. I know. So we are in the middle of July, and today's topic is going to be modern relationships and parental issues and wounds. Boy, it's been a hot summer, and a lot of us have children and people out there that we're hanging out. So I think this is a great thing. Definitely. Yes. And so I know Tommy's having some issues, and we're just trying to work on it to make sure that he can hear us. Yeah. But Brittany, for you, being with family in the summertime is, what would you say?
It can be a beautiful, beautiful time, but I know that the heat does play a factor into our emotions sometimes. So maybe if we're feeling uncomfortable with the weather, it might get us to be a little bit more short with those around us. So that's definitely something to be mindful of. Other than that, vacationing, all of those good things, being able to enjoy time with each other.
Yeah, I think summer memories, and especially if you have kids, it's just precious. Definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. Before we go in deep into the topic, we always do a charity of the month. And the charity of this month is the Attachment and Trauma Network, which is a great website because we are going to be talking about trauma. And so this is the Attachment and Trauma Network. It's a great place to donate if you have funds or also resources in the sense of, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do and I have this trauma. And also, just to say, I do have a book out there called Improving Intimacy, Open Hearts. It's about emotional intimacy, which is what we're focused on in the last few segments that we're running. So let's get deep into this topic. Topic again is dealing with modern relationship, parental issues, and wounds. When I think about this, Brittany, one of the things that I think about is from our parents, we get like a box that gets passed down to us. And if we have children or if we're step parents or we're caretakers of younger people, we take that box and we pass it on to the next.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's in those boxes affect us. Yeah, for sure. And so when we think about relationships, and Main End of 84 on YouTube asks a great question. How do I make sure my own childhood trauma from my parents won't affect my own young children? How do I make sure my own childhood trauma from my parents won't affect my own young children? So as we think about trauma, and trauma many times detaches how, our attachment styles. Yeah. And so I think maybe that should be the first spot we start talking about. It's about attachment styles. So Brittany, and many people hear it and they see it on YouTube and TikTok. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about attachment styles.
Yeah, attachment styles are a very hot topic right now in the counseling world on social media. And attachment styles are essentially the patterns we develop for connecting with other people. And they're often shaped by our earliest relationships. But one of the biggest misconceptions, I believe, is that once you get one attachment style, that's who you are forever. And it's just simply not true. Attachment isn't necessarily a personality trait, it's a pattern. And as we know, patterns can change. Our attachment can shift throughout our lifetime depending on our experiences, our relationships, our levels of stress, and even the different social groups that we're a part of. You might feel incredibly secure with one partner, one really close friend, but more anxious in another relationship. Or sometimes you may notice yourself becoming more avoidant during periods of maybe burnout or after experiencing a very deep betrayal. The goal isn't to reach some mountain peak where you're secure 100% of the time, because the truth of the matter is that none of us are. Not me, not Tommy, not Dr. April. It's just not something that we can achieve. The goal is to become more aware of those shifts and understand what's influencing them and learn how to return to a more secure way of relating. So there are four primary attachment styles. Secure attachment is the one where someone genuinely feels comfortable with both closeness and independence, is able to communicate openly, and trusts that relationships can be safe. When we talk about anxious attachment, it often shows up as a fear of abandonment, needing frequent reassurance, and becoming highly sensitive to the changes in a relationship, more finely attuned to those changes. Avoidant attachment does tend to value independence so strongly that emotional closeness can feel uncomfortable, leading someone to withdraw or keep a distance from either their partner, their friends, their family. Finally, we have disorganized attachment, which is often a combination of the both. It's wanting that closeness while simultaneously fearing it, which can create a push and pull dynamic in relationships. Now, like I said earlier, the good news is that attachment style is not a life sentence. With awareness, healthy relationships, and sometimes exploring it in therapy, we can develop a greater sense of security over time. The goal isn't perfection, because perfection is unachievable. We're not meant to be perfect. We're meant to be human. It's relationships that feel safe, consistent, and emotionally connected that reinforce to us that we can be secure in who we are. We can be secure in our connections. And Tommy, I know that you had a really wonderful point that you brought up the other day when we were chatting about it. So I'd love to hear more on your perspective on attachment.
All right. I agree with you. And sorry for earlier, a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm back. This is such a popular term. Many clients come in, they want to talk about it. They want to try to figure theirs out. And what I found is that I do think that it's been made to be a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. And so I am no expert in the realm of it. I don't want anybody to believe that's where I'm coming from. But as a learner of this myself and a human being learning my own and navigating through it all, I like to find the simplisticness in things. And so I tend to ask my clients a simple question when attachment's coming up. And that is, what do I naturally do when I need someone? I think it's a very simple question, but it alludes to a lot. And when we talk about it, as you said, secure, right? We all want to get there. That seems to be the mountain peak. But one thing I want people to hear is that secure attachment, it doesn't mean that you've never experienced trauma or never will. That does not define whether or not you're secure or not. It just means that you've learned that healthy relationships can be safe places where trust can be rebuilt over time. Therefore, when we break down attachment, and to quickly go through the way that I do with my clients and not to repeat too much, because you did a really good job, is that I like to talk about what do attachments say. And so, secure attachments, I tend to think that they say, I believe people can be trusted, my emotions matter, and that relationships, they are generally safe. And anxious say, well, please don't leave me at all costs. They'll do anything. While the avoidance, as you mentioned, they're like, nah, I can handle this. I got it. Disorganized, it's that push pull. They want closeness, but at the same time, closeness, it also scares me. So where are they in that continuum? And, one thing, Sue Johnson's work, she's the pioneer in the field, has been able to help us understand is that, as you said, these are not personality flaws. The relationship patterns, they're not permanent. They ebb and flow. And so the encouraging part is that healthy relationships can actually help people become more secure or have more secure attachment over a period of time. But we've talked about and hinted to trauma. And so we have to understand that there is an overlap. And I actually think that attachment and trauma overlap quite beautifully in some way, where in this case, without trauma, you have that ability of, as I mentioned, what does the attachment say? But here, when you have trauma, now attachment is going to ask the question, are people safe? Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because I think that trauma is now the thing answering that question. Not you, not your being, but the trauma is answering that question. And it's based on the painful experiences that the person has had. If someone's trust has been repeatedly violated, especially through abuse or even sexual trauma, well, it makes sense that vulnerability would feel threatened. And so I like to pose questions back to my clients to get internal thoughts going, building insight and awareness. And so I'll do the same here. So instead of asking the question, what's wrong with me? If you're a listener and you're trying to figure out, like, where do I fit in attachment and what attachment do I have? And, what do I naturally do? And what is my trauma maybe saying if I have that? Instead of asking what's wrong with me, ask this instead. What has my life taught me about needing people? And is that belief still true today? And go from there.
Mm-hmm. I love that thing about instead of saying, what's wrong with me? What is life taught? Because sometimes people are afraid to even talk about things that have happened in childhood because they like, those were my parents. And when I think about it, even in my own parents, most people do the best they could with what they have. And sometimes all parents make mistakes. I mean, I've been a parent, I've made mistakes, yeah. But what has that taught me? Which goes into what you said. What has that taught me about when I need help?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the reason why I like to ask questions is it helps my clients get from the external, like what's all been happening to me, to more the ownership of like what is inside me. Right. How am I seeing things? How am I reacting to things? What am I doing about things? It puts the ownership of choice and change in their hands.
Right. And to give an example, because some people may like I don't understand, what does that actually mean? So some examples could be if you've been spanked or beaten or something's happened to you in your childhood and you were told not to tell anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many of us were raised with what goes on in this house stays in this house?
Right.
Or don't air out dirty laundry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or another thing that I was kind of raised with, why are you crying? Yeah, no one hit you. I'm going to give you something to cry for.
Yeah. I brought you into this world. I'll take you out. Yeah. What is that supposed to mean to a child?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And so when those things happen in childhood, then you realize, well, I can't really say anything, or I'm not supposed to talk about it, or any of that. Fast forward 20 years, you're in a relationship. Something happens. What do you do?
Yeah. And I think that's why it's important to understand just how does childhood affect our adulthood when it comes to intimacy and love and connection. It didn't happen just overnight or in a vacuum. It comes from a certain place and time. And as we were raised, you can also look at the fact that as we're raised as people, we also are raising the thoughts we have, the negative thoughts, just with the positive thoughts. They're all coming with us and they're being grown in some way.
Right. And if you saw stuff in childhood and you say, I will never, ever, ever do this to my kid. But if you don't learn something different, you will end up, doing something similar or marrying a partner that does something similar because that's what you're used to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which goes into this person, Mayne, I'm not sure guy or woman. How do I make sure that I don't repeat?
Yeah. One of the biggest steps I feel is simply becoming aware of how your own childhood shaped you. When we are better able to understand our triggers and begin to heal from them and learn from them, we're less likely to pass those patterns on to our children. And remember, it's not about that perfection or reaching that mountain peak. It's what's most is being willing to repair after mistakes. It's validating your own child's emotions. It's creating a relationship where they feel safe, where they feel seen, where they feel loved, where they feel heard. I know children do tend to like to talk and share silly little parts of their days. And if you go back into our previous episodes, we did have a conversation about bids for connection, right? In relationships. And that appears in every single relationship. A child showing you a pretty leaf they found as they're walking down the street. Breaking the cycle is, it's never about messing up, because intrinsically, again, we are not perfect. It's about responding differently than what you may have experienced and understanding why those responses were there in the first place, because those responses did serve a purpose at one point in time. They were there to keep us safe, right? It's just once we get to a certain age, it's reflecting on, is this really keeping me safe, or is this preventing me from connecting with other people, from deepening my relationships, from encountering different perspectives in life. So it starts off with becoming aware. And once we have that awareness, we get to that power of choice. We're able to understand ourselves and how we interact with the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I personally think that, and this isn't just normal people. I think even there's therapists out there that do this too. And there is this very underestimated perspective of just how much childhood does influence adulthood. Like there's this place, we turn 18 and all of a sudden childhood just disappears. And now we're an adult and we're learning all over again or something. And I think we need to understand that childhood doesn't just produce memories. It's far more than that. It actually, and probably more so, it gives us expectations. And it teaches us things like, what does love look like? What does conflict look like? What does emotional safety look like? Is my emotional needs, are they even welcomed, or are they ignored? And if we have things like abuse that comes in, or sexual trauma that comes in, anything that distorts the reality, then, well, when that's imposed, again, it doesn't just affect those memories. It is going to affect the body. And it affects the body by changing the way that adult is going to grow, or that child will grow into adulthood, rather experiencing things like touch, vulnerability, trust, emotional safety, and so forth. So in simplified terms, I think if you could look at your upbringing and say that, well, I was growing up where affection and honesty and forgiveness and healthy conflict, well, those were all modeled for me. Well, there's a very good chance that those will become strengths, natural strengths that you will pull into any of your relationships. But if those things were inconsistent, manipulated, absent, and used against you, well, those experiences are going to quietly shape how you approach intimacy today, connection, vulnerability, security. So one of the things, though, that I've noticed, and to kind of answer this question from both a marital standpoint and maybe as a parental standpoint, what I've noticed working with couples is that one will often respond to their significant other through everything their past taught them about relationships. And so take that. It could be your significant other. It could also be your child. How are you responding when stress rises up, when conflict rises up, when anger rises up? How are you responding? Is it your past that you're responding through, the traumas teaching you how to do that? And so as counselors, whether we're talking about Adlerian psychology, attachment theory, and even scripture, here's an important thing. They all point to the fact of examining the heart, because our inner beliefs and the relationship that we have with ourselves, because remember, life starts with the relationship with ourselves, it shapes our outward relationships. So again, that could be a partner, spouse, your children, so forth. But as you said, Brittany, and I agree with you, the encouraging news in this is that what shaped you doesn't have to define you. It's not permanent. In other words, trauma may explain why, someone in front of us is struggling, but it doesn't determine how their story has to end. So awareness is something you touched on, and that is so key. Once we become aware of the patterns that we have, we can begin choosing healthier ones. And with healthy relationships, and I'll echo good counseling and intentional healing, people can absolutely experience safe and healthy intimacy in relationships with a loved one, with their spouse, with family, even with their children.
Yeah, thank you definitely for saying that we can experience healthy relationships. So when you've been traumatized and like you said, you respond and you're like, okay, now I'm aware when my partner gets upset with me, let's say you have an anxious attachment. Yeah. And usually that could be where you demand that they respond. If they said they need a break, you follow them, you chase them around. I want to know the answer right now, right now, or you have an avoidant. Your partner's upset and you just like, I can't deal with this anymore. I seclude myself, I go eat some Twinkies or drink or just go by myself. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you've recognized the awareness of the pattern. What do you do about it next?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things is kind of like you said, Tommy, many times we respond based on all this other stuff that we've claimed from childhood or from past awareness, is to kind of stay in your body. What's really happening right now? How can I ground myself?
Yeah.
How can I ground myself? Whether it means to call a timeout, just to step aside. Yeah, but figure ways of how to ground yourself. So I know that I'm actually communicating with the person in front of me.
Yeah. Present awareness will definitely help if you can find yourself in a position to do what you're suggesting, like be able to stop, maybe even stop and remove yourself, or you could practice like the DBT skill, stop, stop in the present moment, take yourself out of that, environment if you can, observe what's going on, and then practice with yourself. And I know I forget what the P at this time stands for, but practice re-engaging mindfully. Then you have to ask yourself, what am I feeling? Is the way that I'm feeling validated? That I feel like that person just disrespected me, but if I listen back to what was it really, or am I just in a odd mood? Am I hearing them incorrectly? Validate your feelings so that way you are able to respond back emotionally in the proper way, but also having that internal dialogue where, is what I'm saying being received correctly? Am I being heard the way I want to be heard? Am I physically reacting? My body language, is it in tune with how I think and how I feel? And is my body language is it being perceived the way I want it to be perceived? We sometimes forget that body language, I tell my clients all the time, the most underutilized and most universal language is body language. You may not know the language of the culture I'll drop you into, but if you got to go to the bathroom, there's a universal sign that I got to go to the bathroom. So body language is key sometimes in this. And when we talk about children, I think children are very keen in picking up body language, especially from their parents. My mom could have gave me a look, if I was messing up. And I knew right then, like if I go one step further, that look is turning into something else. So
and you know that at a very young, and I was going to say, Tom, you got that at a very young age. Sometimes parents think my kid doesn't know, and they're 6 or 8, but very young.
Yeah, I think kids are very resilient and they're very observant. And even if a child doesn't have the words to say, their body is still reacting in ways that they may not understand. So, we have to, as parents, the ownership, the hierarchy of emotions is on us to our kids. And no matter how old your kids get, that hierarchy doesn't change. You still are in charge of the emotional display. And so, we can't sit there as parents and say we want to raise our kids to be honest and respectful and forthright and know good and bad and all these good things. But then when they become adults and they want to talk about it, we say, no, I did my best. You got to deal with that. So again, and how do I stop, what Mayne is asking, again, it goes back to, are you repeating patterns that was told to you? I'm the adult, I said so. Well, that's for you to handle. Or are you willing to allow your kids to have a safety place where they're able to say, I felt this way. I saw this. I'm thinking a certain way and I'm not sure. And are you willing to validate, to affirm, to be a part of that safety parameter where they're able to grow and understand that their emotions are okay?
And if you don't know how, therapy, self-help books.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you make sure my own childhood trauma from my parents won't affect me? You learn and you do something different. You learn new things and do something different, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The next great question we got in here, from Anonymous, those who have dated people with bad and good childhoods, what are the differences between them? It's a great question. I want to start this off by saying many times the emotional level of your life or your emotional intimacy, whatever level that is, and if it's very weak, many times we will attract people that have that same emotional level. Okay. So if you're out there dating, you're like, why am I dating the same people over and over again? One thing is to look within oneself. Yeah. And then looking in, and like I said, if you know better, if you know how to do it, fine. If not, learn about it and do about it. But then there's also kind of like this question says, when bad childhoods come together and good childhood comes together, or bad and good combination, what are the difference between them? So one of the difference that I see when people have come from childhoods, and no childhood is perfect. Let me just put it that way. Okay. Yeah. So we have a variety of different things. But let's say in childhood, you weren't able to have your feelings recognized, validated, or even learn how to self-regulate. And yes. So what I personally see is that usually this couple has a hard time coping with difficult topics, talking through things. They yell and scream. They cannot hear what the other person's saying. They just cannot sit there and talk about difficult things. What do you see, Brittany, when people come from childhoods that have been difficult and they kind of hook up together, especially in the young culture?
Yeah, I think that it essentially boils down to somebody being in survival mode. We know that trauma really does impact how we interact with the world. And like we've mentioned a few times, I've seen it and I truly believe it, is the body keeps the score. We keep that trauma stored within ourselves. So if somebody's been in a state of chronic hypervigilance is, for example, somebody who may have grown up with parents who argued a lot. Maybe there was a lot of yelling and screaming, slamming doors. So whenever a door would slam in their presence now, they might flinch, or they might be able to distinguish who's coming down the hallway based on footsteps alone, right? Those are all signs that somebody's living in a chronic state of fight or flight. So if that's present within a couple dynamic or even a friendship dynamic, it might be hard for somebody who's in a place where they're feeling more secure in themselves to interact with them or have conversations about those heavier topics, because it feels like a trigger. It feels like an attack. It does not feel safe. Hence the lack of the sense of safety, which we know is one of the biggest things when it comes to trauma and having those types of conversations. So it's a challenge, yes, especially in recognizing that in oneself and coming to terms with the fact that, hey, maybe my parents weren't necessarily teaching me the healthiest thing possible, but it's not, like we've been saying time and time again, it's not a sentence for life. With that education, those self-help books, right? That's empowerment. And the way that we can access that change within ourselves comes from that empowerment. So learning as much as we can, seeking good therapy, having conversations, and recognizing what makes us feel uncomfortable. What we're feeling inside of ourselves, like Tommy had said, is taking that internal temperature, gauging where we're at when somebody brings up a difficult conversation. Is the anxiety bubbling up inside of us? And then if we want to take it a step further, where am I feeling that anxiety? For a lot of my clients, a typical response would be, I feel it in my chest. My chest gets heavy. My heart starts beating faster. My hands may be getting a little sweaty. And that's the mind-body connection. That's the body communicating, hey, nervous system's activating. We got to do something. That's when we can do the stop method. We can enact our coping skills, maybe step away, take a few deep breaths, go on a run if time allows for it in the moment, right? Do something to help get that energy and that emotion from the inside to the external in a healthy way, not by exploding at our partners, not by getting angry at something that's happened, not by, being an aggressive driver back, but through that self-regulation helps us get to that place where we can live our lives in a more peaceful way. I think that's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling me that when I threw temper tantrums as a child and I got a sucker, that I can't do that as an adult and somehow still get the sucker?
Exactly.
Darn. You're going to have to grow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. That is a very tough question. I've been racking my brain thinking how to answer that too. And I think the way to answer that, it also depends if we're, from someone like me, I come from a different background. I do come from a traumatized background. And so when I read that question, what's the difference? My first initial thought is, why is there a difference? Are we trying to say that because a person has a bad childhood, that there's bad things? Because a person had a good childhood, there's good things? Because that really isn't going to be true. Someone can have a traumatized background and still come out very healthy, depending on how they decided to handle that stress as they grew, and especially grew in adulthood. What changes did they take? What ownership of things did they take? Just like someone from a good childhood could go off, say, to college, and the whole, like, they get wild and crazy and things happen. So, so I kind of look at that different, and I say it's kind of subjective. I think what we have to do is look at how are people behaving and answer the questions like, why are they behaving in that way? And so it's different. I look at that, and I don't know if I have a really good solid answer without trying to dissect, what could it look like of a father? Like, what wounds you have with a father, what wounds you have from a mother? How does that go into your childhood? What decisions did you make? And really kind of map out the whole thing. Same with a good childhood. We have to ask the same questions because, as we said, there is no perfect parent. So, and then safety, vulnerability, emotions, how have all that been brought into someone's viewpoint and world, and how has it been shaped? So I think you did a really good job, Ray. That was a great way to answer that. I don't know if I have much of a follow-up for that, as again, I'm still trying to rack my brain on, like, really, how would I bring that to a solid end, or a questioned answer, I should say, without dissecting too much.
Right. And I wonder, and I'm glad you clarified that. I wonder if another question just off of that right there, we've been talking about, when you recognize yourself that, I'm starting to unwind and I'm starting to react and do things that it doesn't feel good for my body. My body is saying X, Y, Z. Before we close it out, I was just thinking, what if we see this in our partner? You know what I'm saying? And maybe we've met our partner's parents, and then maybe there's been stuff there. But for some reason, we're in a marriage, and our partner is either anxious, and they get upset. They just really want to connect so much, and just can be overwhelming. And or our partner is avoiding.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do as a spouse? Wow.
Yeah, that's also a tough one.
Tricky question.
Yeah, that is a tough one. Yes. Yes. So if we don't quite have an answer now, then I'm challenging you guys.
Yeah.
We're going to go take a break, and we come back. We're going to tell you tips about how yourself, when you feel, hey, that my emotional response right now is not the best that it could be, or if I see it in my parent, or not my parent, but if I see it in my spouse, what can I do? All right, we'll be back in a moment.
Life can be overwhelming sometimes. We think we are a burden to others. We think that it's better to hide it and suppress our hurt, but it's not. As Cave Coral Therapists, we will provide you with quality, confidential counseling services in a relaxing and peaceful environment. Talk to a professional today. Book an appointment on www.cavecoraltherapist.com or call 239-565-6921.
All right, welcome back to the Bringing Intimacy Show, where intimacy is real. So the question that was posed out there is, what if you're in a relationship or in a marriage and your spouse, you just had a conflict, and emotionally they're not doing well, whether it's because they have an anxious attachment or an avoidant attachment? What do you do?
I think for this question, the answer is a little tricky because of the fact that it's so nuanced. It, I believe, varies from person to person, from relationship to relationship. It depending on what somebody's emotional state might be. They may be extremely defensive if the partner, we'll say with a more healthy relationship with their emotions, approaches them, they might get, again, defensive, they might get combative, they might not even want to talk about it, right? Going back to that avoidant attachment style. So it depends on the couple, it depends on the situation, but I think going back to one of the points we talked about today is that education is empowerment. So maybe reading up on things or passing something along to your partner in a state where both emotions are kind of leveled out. We're at our base level functioning outside of that heightened, flooded emotional state where that conversation might stem. So engaging in moments that are a little softer, we could say, right? Where there's not that emotional intensity present. One thing that I really do suggest to my couples a lot when I work with them is go to a third space. Go to a space, maybe like a coffee shop, out to the park, or since we're in Florida, go out to the beach and have a conversation in a place that's more neutral. Because if we're in our homes, it's our comfort space. We might feel more inclined to let our emotions get the best of us a little more so than if we're out in public and we have that extra level of societal pressure, if you will. So finding a space to have that conversation outside of the emotional intensity, I think, is a really great first step. And maybe even seeking some counseling could be beneficial as well, right? To better learn how to communicate with each other, to better engage with each other in a way that's healthy and productive, because that's the goal at the end of the day.
I love that idea of actually taking time and responding back when it's much more calmer, and also going to a neutral space. Love that idea. Yeah. Tommy?
I agree. The thoughts I have is like, what's the history? What's been the temperament? How long has this been perceiving? Because there's all this wrapped into where, I would hate to give an answer and then someone try it, but because there's all this other stuff not figured out, it falls short or it's backfiring. But again, I agree with Brittany that there's a lot that can be done if we understand some of those parameters, and counseling is definitely a safe place where you can have not just a third space, but a third party that holds both of the couples in the same alignment. Because the relationship for us, when you come to counseling for me, it's not either person is my client. The relationship that you have is my client, and my job is to help you kind of understand that relationship and what's hurting it or what's going to heal it. And so I would like to pose something instead of talking to the spouse. That's like, how do I talk to my spouse? Obviously, that means there's been times of closed offness or avoidance or however. What about if I could talk to the spouse that if you're listening today and you're being told this, how you can perceive this? You guys mind if I do that? Try to give some advice to that person?
Of course, definitely.
So if your spouse that is asking that question, or if you're listening and you've been told this, that you respond certain ways, as I said, attachment and trauma do kind of beautifully overlap. And so one of the misconceptions, I think, is believing that trauma permanently defines our relationships. And so if you're listening, I want you to really hear this. You are not damaged, and you are not too damaged for any healthy relationship just because you have trauma. So whether you have experienced neglect, abuse, betrayal, sexual trauma, or your past, it's just riddled with inconsistencies or unmet circumstances. It does explain why there's struggles. It may explain why your spouse is telling you, hey, something's not right. Hey, maybe we need to go see counseling. But it doesn't have to define your future, and it doesn't have to remove your capacity to heal. Some of the lessons, as said before, some of the lessons may have given us incredible strengths, and we need people to see that, not to lose those. But there are other patterns that we all have that may no longer lead in our relationships. We may need to unlearn some of those patterns. So when I have couples, I often like to tell people, until we understand the relationships that have shaped us, we'll often find ourselves reoccurring those relationships without realizing it. So we have to learn. And that's where awareness gives us that language. It will give you the language. It can help with healing. Healing gives us freedom, and healthy relationships, well, that gives us opportunities to experience something different than we've ever known before. So if you have a spouse that's telling you, hey, listen to me, like you're pushing away, or you're suffocating me, or whatever, understand that there are other choices, and you want to give yourself the opportunity to have a healthy relationship. And the hopeful part of awareness will give you the power of choice. And once you have a choice, healing and healthier relationships become possible. Healing is possible, and one of the most beautiful parts of healing, well, it's discovering that relationships can become places of safety instead of survival. And that's what you have to understand is, are you surviving? Are you just surviving? Or do you want to learn to thrive and have a healthy, loving relationship? So if I could leave just one tip, it'd be simply this: become a student of your own story. Ask yourself, what did my earliest relationships teach me about love, trust, conflict, emotion, and my own wealth? And what is my spouse or my significant other trying to teach me as well?
Thank you. Yes. And to combine your both of what you're saying, awareness is key. And as Brittany has said, sometimes you can feel that awareness in your body. When your heart is racing, you're sweating, maybe your mind is getting overwhelmed, and your body is saying, hey, I need safety. I need safety. That means, hey, there's something going on. And as you become aware, then the next part kind of also is sense of what Brittany is saying, is to actually communicate it. Start communicating first with yourself. And then when there's a quiet moment or a time that you and your partner can sit down and talk, you find a spot and you say, yesterday, last week, I just became such and such. This is what I need. And have your partner say what they need, and come up with a plan. Come up with a plan on, when we have conflict, this is what we're going to do. And see if you can follow the plan. And if you cannot follow the plan, or you have a hard time compromising, it's always good to go into therapy.
Absolutely.
Because, couples therapy, our job is not to pick side on who's right or wrong. That's not the job of the therapist. Our job is to help you guys see each other. Definitely. But and so someone just put, but what if you are not aware? So if you're not aware, you're thinking like, oh, I'm not aware. Sometimes it's good to be open to feedback. If one person tells you something, maybe, but when two or three, that means a trend starts to happen. And when there's a trend, we got to really look with it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. So this has been a great conversation for sure. And we're going to keep conversating about emotional intimacy because it's so important. Yes. What's coming up, Tommy?
Well, I'd like to ask our viewers, thank you for tuning in, but help us out. Don't just tune in, like, subscribe, share us, hit that bell icon if you're on YouTube. It really helps us out, because if you're watching this, whatever questions you have, there are other people that have the same. So please share us to other people, let the information spread, and help us make change, positive change in the world. As far as what's coming up, as you know, we every Thursday at 1 o'clock, there is an episode, but every other Thursday is our live. So the next live is going to be July 30th. And we're going to talk about the topic oversharing, online attention, and emotional cheating. So that's going to be a hot topic right there. Following that, the next live, August 13th, trauma bonds versus true love. As I said, every other week is live, but in between the weeks, you can catch many of our previous episodes, past seasons, and more information within the off weeks as well. So again, like, subscribe, share, help us out.
Yes, thank you. Yes, definitely. Like, subscribe, and if you have any questions, hit us up on social media. And if you've missed any of our shows, Brittany, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go ahead and check out our social media platforms. YouTube, we definitely have all of those videos on there. So you could check out previous episodes from this season and previous seasons as well, where we go a little bit deeper into different topics surrounding emotional intimacy and what that means. So if you aren't aware, it might be a really good place to start there and to start exploring and getting educated for that empowerment.
Yes. Well, thank you, guys. This has been the Bringing Intimacy show, where intimacy is real. We will see you guys live in 2 weeks, and check us out next week on our podcast. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Bringing Intimacy Back, where intimacy is real. To continue the conversation, visit us at bringingintimacyback.com and connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, X, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platforms. Looking to deepen your relationships even further? Check out Dr. April Brown's Improving Intimacy book series, now available on Amazon and Kindle, including the newest edition, Open Hearts, Strong Bonds. Be sure to join us again next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another meaningful conversation about relationships, connection, communication, and intimacy. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, share, and leave a review to help us bring intimacy back to even more people. Until next time, keep building deeper connections, one conversation at a time.